get a cup of coffee and just, are you serious? The jihadist movement is alive and well there in the Middle East and around the world. Let me just play for you. This is a 52 seconds audio, but this is the mentality that's being spread around the world against Christianity by jihadist Muslims, okay? And there is one leader right now. He's called a jihadist leader. His name is Hamad al-Baghdadi al-Hassani. Now, let me share with you his thoughts against Christianity.
Jihadi leader Ahmed al-Baghdadi al-Hassani has spoken of Christians as polytheists and friends of the Zionists. In an Egyptian TV address, the extremist leader further stressed they must choose Islam or death, while their women and girls may legitimately be regarded as wives of Muslims. The statements do not come as a complete surprise, but do mark a diversion from Baghdadi's usual attacks against Americans. Today he lives in Syria supporting the armed opposition, where it's likely his words will have muted impact due to the limited number of Christians in much of Syria. Al-Hassani's comments seem to mark a growing trend of anti-Christian sentiment in the Muslim world, with them coming just after a group of Egypt's Christian women voters were banned from casting their ballot in the disputed constitutional referendum.
Now, the Bible says in Matthew 24, Jesus was asked, as he was teaching and was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him and said, can you tell us when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? And everybody knows these next few lines, but I want to get to the one that maybe is overlooked. Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, pestilence, earthquakes in divers places, and all of these are the beginning of sorrow. Then shall they be delivered up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and shall say all, and shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Listen to this report again about Christianity from the eyes of a jihadist leader.
Jihadi leader Ahmed al-Baghdadi al-Hassani has spoken of Christians as polytheists and friends of the Zionists. In an Egyptian TV address, the extremist leader further stressed they must choose Islam or death, while their women and...
Hold it. The first problem you have with Hamad al-Baghdadi al-Hassani is that Christians are viewed as polytheists and friends of the Zionists. Polytheist means worshippers of more than one God. It's absolutely incorrect. There is only but one God, and we worship Him. For there's one Lord, one faith, one baptism. We're all baptized into one body. Now there is different 7 classifications or categories of Christians. And you guys know my message of the 7 eyes of Christ. But what the radical Islamic jihadist, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, what he's saying is that we are polytheists or friends of the Zionists, and thus we are worthy to be killed and our wives and our daughters taken automatically as wives of Muslims. That is an outrage. Are you serious? What? Folks, we got to stop. We got to take a step back and just ask ourselves, what are they really teaching? They're teaching absolute murder. They are justifying murder and kidnapping and massacring of Christians and Jews. And they do it and justify themselves and say they have a right to do it, when it's absolutely incorrect. Now you might say, Paul, this isn't what the guy is saying. Listen again.
Jihadi leader Ahmed al-Baghdadi al-Hassani has spoken of Christians as polytheists and friends of the Zionists. In an Egyptian TV address, the extremist leader further stressed they must choose Islam or death, while their women and girls may legitimately be regarded as wives of Muslims. The statements do not come as a complete surprise, but do mark a diversion from Baghdadi's usual attacks against Americans. Today he lives in Syria supporting the armed opposition, where it's likely his words will have muted impact due to the limited number of Christians in much of Syria. Al-Hassani's comments seem to mark a growing trend of anti-Christian sentiment in the Muslim world, with them coming just after a group of Egypt's Christian women voters were banned from casting their ballots in the disputed constitutional referendum.
Folks, so the Muslim world, under leaders like this jihadist leader, they believe that all Christians are polytheists, or worshippers of more than one God, and friends of the Jews. Thus, they should either choose Islam or death. Now, and then their wives and daughters are automatically the wives of Muslims. That is exactly the doctrine. You might say, well, Paul, that's just one guy. That's a weird, twisted group of Muslims. That's a radical Islam. That's not how it all is. That's exactly what the Quran says they can do. I've read it myself. It's in the Quran. It's in the Quran. It is what they are taught. It's what's being preached in their mosque. It's not being preached as a peaceable religion. Trust me. This is why it's this anti-Christian sentiment is growing in the Middle East, is because it is the doctrine of the Prophet Muhammad. It is what they're teaching. And thus, jihad is on the rise. And now this is an Egyptian jihadist leader who's now living in Syria. But this Muslim Brotherhood that has taken over the Middle East is absolutely going after Christians and Jews, and especially the Christians in nations like Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Yemen, and Syria. They are murdering Christians. They're crucifying Christians. They're beheading Christians in Tunisia, crucifying Christians in Egypt, murdering Christians in Libya, Yemen, and Syria. And while America sits back and worries about falling off a fiscal cliff, the world is turning against Christianity and Jews and democracy with everything they've got. Now, Jesus said, I'll go back to Matthew 24. He said, for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, pestilence, earthquakes in divers places, and all of these are the beginning of sorrows. And everybody stops right there. But let's read on. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, just like this guy, and deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many will wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached into all the world for a witness unto all nations. And then shall the end come. And of course, you can continue reading in Matthew 24 as there's more points. But I'm going to say now, you're beginning to see this portion of Matthew 24. Everybody stops at all of the storms and the earthquakes and the volcanoes and the tsunamis, but you must go on. The attack against Christians and Jews is not just a Middle East problem. It will become a worldwide problem, and it is part of the signs of the apocalypse. Give your life to Jesus Christ. Be born again. We're running out of time in these last days.